Welcome to the Senate Committee on Government Affairs this afternoon, and I appreciate all of you joining us online. And members, remember to please mute your microphone when not speaking, and Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Vice Chair Orenshaw, Senator Goycochea,
Here.
Senator Neal,
Here.
Senator Hansen,
Here.
Chair Dondero Loop.
Here, and please mark Mr. Orenshaw present. As he arrives, he's presenting in another committee. So we have 4 members present, so we have a quorum, and we'll see Mr. Vice Chair Orenshaw soon. So I think that we all know now that there are various ways for us to join in this virtual environment. So if anyone does not have any of that information, please go to the Nevada Legislature website, and there you can click on Nellis, and there is a help button, and it outlines all of those various ways. I do appreciate everybody's patience as we work through this. After we hear the bill, we will have support and opposition and neutral. Please listen, as broadcasting will tell you when to unmute and how to unmute. And then at the very end, we'll have a period of public comment. Remember that public comment and all testimony is listed as 2 minutes per speaker, and public testimony can also be sent in via email or given verbally. And remember, public comment is at the end of the meeting is for anything not related to the bills that we heard. If you're speaking to the bills that we heard, please speak during that time. Today, we're going to hear 2 bills, and we're going to start with Senate Bill 12. And with that, I'll open up the hearing. And this measure requires certain notices before the termination of a restriction relating to the affordability of certain housing. Will the bill presenters, Senator Ratty and others, proceed when you're ready?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Julia Ratty, and I am a senator representing Senate District 13. That's sort of the middle of Reno and Sparks, if you will. I have downtown Reno and downtown Sparks, plus some of the surrounding area. I'm excited to be here today in this particular role. In 2019, the legislature recognized that affordable housing was a critical issue and reconstituted the Nevada Housing Advisory Committee. And I was lucky enough to be appointed to that advisory committee and honored to be elected the chair. And so I'm sitting here before you today as the chair of the Housing Advisory Committee. That Housing Advisory Committee was granted 1 bill draft, and the bill that you see before you, SB 12, is the bill draft that the Housing Advisory Committee brought forward. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. And if you could just let me know that you can see the first slide. Fantastic, thank you. So we've done a lot of work talking about affordable housing and needing to build more and more units. But I think a place that we may have missed the mark a little bit is being focused on preserving the affordable housing that we already have. There's a wonderful quote here that the most cost-effective investment that the public sector can make in ensuring that its citizens have decent and affordable is assuring that its citizens have decent and affordable places to live. Just remembering, of course, that housing stability is sort of the cornerstone for everything else. If you're struggling kind of to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're struggling to maintain housing, then you're probably not thriving in your education, in your healthcare, in your job, many other aspects of your life. And so we will continue to focus on the issue of affordable housing. So first of all, let's just narrow it down to what we're talking about here today. Affordable housing has become a commonly used term, and it could talk about whether or not it's affordable to be able to purchase your first home, or whether or not if you're making a certain amount of income, you can afford to rent in a market. For today's presentation, we are specifically talking about subsidized housing that was developed specifically so those individuals with lower incomes would have a place to live. So when we're talking about affordable housing, we're really talking about the traditional affordable housing that has a subsidy on it. These units are usually rent based on an individual's ability to pay or the income bracket that they sit in. So to get this affordable housing, we use a variety of tools, mostly low-income housing tax credits, and that results in a contract. And so the developer brings some money to the table, we use some tools to help them along, and that contract then requires that that developer maintains the affordability of that development for a certain period of time, usually 15 to 30 years. Most of the new contracts that we're doing now are 30 years. So well over 90% of the units that we have in the state of Nevada that are subsidized, meaning that how much income you have matters, and you're going to get a rental rate based on how much income you have, are built with low-income housing tax credits. So that's the first thing that it's important to understand. So what's affordable housing preservation, which is the focus of this bill? Well, because most of these bills are built with the promise from the developer to keep a unit for affordable for a fixed amount of time, that means that those contracts eventually expire. And so if you're in a community like many of the communities here in Nevada where the growth rate is driving up rent, it can make it tempting for that developer to flip that property from being affordable or subsidized to market rate. So basically when they've fulfilled the responsibilities in their contract and they're looking around at, well, I can make a lot more money now if I just make this market rate, we risk losing those subsidized units. And so then preservation is any action that is taken to safeguard these subsidies, federal and subsidies that mean that low-income individuals will have a place to live. So this is why it's cost effective and will save taxpayers dollars. So the cost to preserve a unit, to keep a unit affordable, is usually about 30 to 50% less than the cost to develop a new property altogether. And so we've already invested taxpayer dollars in these subsidized affordable housing units, usually in the millions of dollars. And if we can extend the life of that property, then we can protect that initial investment. And then the truth of the matter is, because of land use restrictions, not in my backyard, not having enough land available, the cost of land, labor, lumber, all those things, it's difficult to build affordable units now. So anything that we can do to keep the units that we have is critically important. So in Nevada, I think it's important that we pause to say just how important of an issue is this. Nevada, unfortunately, ranks among one of the worst states in terms of the amount of available affordable housing. We have an extreme shortage. So renters in Nevada are particularly in need. So 44% of households in Nevada rent. They don't own their own place to live, and so they are renters. HUD says that the fair market rent in Nevada is $1,065. But I think anybody who's listening to this who's tried to rent a two-bedroom apartment anywhere in the state probably knows that these numbers lag. The data is probably a couple of years old. And so if you go down a little bit to the actual average rent, just looking at January 7th and a survey on January 7th, in the Las Vegas Valley, it was about $1,211 to rent a two-bedroom apartment. In Reno Sparks, gasp, $1,436 is the average rent for a two-bedroom apartment. In order to be able to afford that apartment, you would need to, in Vegas, be making $26.51 per hour. In Reno, you'd need to be making $30 per hour to be able to afford that. We know that the average renter's wage is only $17.42. So what that means is in Nevada, we have an extraordinary number of people who are what's known as cost burdened. In the affordable housing world, we look at if you spend 30% or more of your income, the healthy amount to spend of your income on housing is 30%. Anything more than 30%, and then you're probably starting to cut into your healthcare, extracurricular activities for your kids, other things that you're not doing because too high of a percentage of your income is going to housing. So cost burdened, we consider to be 30%. Severely cost burdened is when over half of your income is going to your housing. So in Nevada, if you are extremely low income, so these are folks who are making 30% or less of the area area median income. So this is probably going to be a senior on a fixed income. Maybe they worked their whole life, but their Social Security payment is $1,000 a month or less. Or maybe it's a person with a disability who's on a fixed income from receiving disability. 93% of the folks in Nevada who fall into that category are cost burdened. 93% pay more than 30% of their income towards an apartment. 81% of them pay more than half of their rent to an apartment. If you get to the very low income, 31 to 50%. So now we're like, well, maybe you had a little bit better job, so now you're on a fixed income retirement as a senior, but you're making a little bit more money. Or perhaps you have a lower wage job working in the state of Nevada. Of those folks, 87% of them are paying more than 30% of their income to have a place to live. And 43%, closing in on half of them, are paying half of their income just to have a place to live. And again, when you pay half of your income to have a place to live, then you're not investing in other things that you need: a car, your healthcare, extracurricular activities for your kids. And even for those folks who are in the middle income, you're anywhere from 81 to 100% of median income. In Nevada, almost a third of those folks are paying more than 30% of their income to affordable housing. What happens is the folks at the 81 to 100% and the 51 to 80% are competing with the extremely low income and very low income for units. And the truth of the matter is people who are low income just can't compete, and they end up at risk of homelessness, sleeping on a neighbor's couch, whatever they can do to stay housed. So unfortunately, here's the extreme shortage. So if you look at the extremely low income individuals, the folks who are most vulnerable, seniors on a very fixed income or a person with a disability, we have 18 units for every 100 that we need. That means that 82 out of every 100 people are out there trying to find housing in the competing in the market. If you're 50% area median or below, we only have 40 of the 100 units that we need. So the other 60 folks are out there competing in the market. I think you get the idea. Nevada just flat out doesn't have enough units. So we put a lot of time and attention into building more units. So this is, we spent a lot of time talking about low-income housing tax credits last session. So we get this allocation from the federal government. We're able to use that allocation to incentivize developers to build units. They build those units with a contract for about 30 years. And we keep trying to put more and more units into the market. But I'll just take you across the top line. So in 2011, 592 units were built. We use the same low-income housing tax credit tools and some other tools that we have in the toolkits to do renovation. If we do a renovation of an existing affordable housing project, it adds more years to the timeline that it has to be affordable. And so in this particular year, we renovated 163 of our existing units, which was great. That meant that 755 units were shiny and new and ready for somebody who was low income to live in them. But as you can see, the net increase was only 273 new units because that second to last column, we lost 319 units that year. So even though we built 592, we lost 319, and we end up with only 273 new units. And you can see that trend. 2012 was a particularly bad year because we didn't build a whole lot of new units and we lost quite a few that expired. And if you get to 2020, we're getting better and better, building more and more units. You can see that average from 2016 to 2020, we've been trying to push out more and more units. So we're now up to almost 900 units that we build in a given year. We're renovating 780 to keep those in the market. But because we lost 579 to contract expirations, that really only meant that 319 new units were put into the stock. So hopefully we're painting a picture here that losing the existing inventory is weighing us down. We can build all the new units in the world, but if we can't keep the ones that we've already got, we're not making any progress. We're kind of like that hamster on the hamster wheel. We're not making enough progress. We're making a little bit of progress, but not enough progress. So at this point in time, this is why we're bringing this bill right now. there are 7,500 units at risk over the next 5 years of expiring. That means that that contract will come up, and if that developer chooses to flip to market rate, we will lose those units. 400 of them are 30-year tax credit properties. 6,500 are tax credit properties that go through a state process. You can see the details on the slide. So with that, knowing that we are at risk of losing 7,500 affordable units when we only build about 800, 900 a year over the next 5 years, I want to turn it over to Bill Brewer. Bill is also a member of the Housing Advisory Committee with me. He is the executive director of the Nevada Rural Housing Authority, and he's going to tell you a little bit about why housing preservation is an important strategy.
Go
Thank you,
ahead.
Senator Ratty.
Go ahead when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Senator Ratty. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you very much for this opportunity to visit with you today. Senator Ratty has explained very well what the challenges are that we face with our affordable housing stock in Nevada. We only have so many tools that we can use to preserve housing. If you'll roll to the next slide, please. The low-income housing tax credit, of course, is a primary tool that's used in building and preserving affordable units in Nevada. That tool is coupled with some other funding resources, oftentimes to produce units, but most of these units have low-income housing tax credits in them. Home Investments Partnership Program is a grant fund that's provided through the federal government to the state. We get some money in that each year, but it's not nearly enough to produce many units. In fact, it's primarily used as a gap filler to help projects get off the ground. And the same with our State Housing Trust Fund. As vital as these funding sources are, they are not substantial. And so they help fill gaps, and they're very important, but they're not big sources of money. And so you can see from Senator Ratty's presentation, they don't produce a tremendous amount of units. Are there other states in the country that are preserving their units? Absolutely. We've listed a few here, some red, some blue. These laws are just good practice to preserve the investment that the taxpayers have already made into these units and to keep them as affordable for the people who live there. What's this bill going to do and what's it not going to do? This is important to consider. First of all, it will provide adequate time so that we can collaborate and figure out how we can perhaps retain and rehabilitate these units and keep them affordable through the existing owner or through a new purchaser. It will support the Nevada affordable housing supply and availability to those people who really do need it. It gives us 12 months for those tenants to, if the housing project is really going offline and will not be affordable any longer, it gives those tenants at least a good amount of time to find additional housing and to get moved to someplace else, which is really critical. What this bill will not do, this bill will not impact the budget, has no fiscal impact at all. It will not affect homeowners. It applies only to rental properties. And in fact, it only applies to those multifamily properties which have been built using the financing tools I spoke of earlier. It will not affect privately funded multifamily properties. It does not provide additional funding for preservation. It seeks only to preserve that funding we've already invested. It does not mandate that the local governments need to do anything different or in addition. No mandate there at all. It does not force an owner to offer rental subsidies or to relocate tenants when those affordability restrictions have expired, nor does it remove any property rights for that property owner. So we're not talking about taking anything, we're talking about preserving. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Acroft.
Thank you, Bill and Senator Ratty, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, Steve Acroft. Administrator of the Nevada Housing Division, and it's my pleasure to walk you through the mock-up amendment of the bill indicated in the exhibits as proposed amendment 3125. Next slide, please. Section 2 lists the definitions applicable to the affordability of housing. And here I would really like to focus in on one definition as it's key to understanding what we are trying to accomplish here. And that is the qualified contract indicated in number 5. Next slide. The qualified contract, and you're going to hear me refer to this as the QC provision, was established in 1989, 3 years after the enactment of the federal tax credit legislation. Originally, it was intended to reduce a windfall to the owner, but really has had the opposite effect because it statutorily determines a sales price which is typically higher than market rate, actually creating an overinflated sales price for the property. It also allows for a property to leave affordability before the prescribed 30-year affordability period, allows the division a year time frame to locate a purchaser at that inflated price, and once the contract is obtained, the existing residents have a 3-year period of affordability before those restrictions are removed. To better understand this and its relation to the bill, I'd like to go over the high-level timeliness or timelines related to affordability. And as I walk you through this, I want you to kind of envision 2 buckets of 15 years. So starting at the top, the 2 blue boxes represent the first 15 years in which everything kind of runs together at the same time. Everybody goes through this process. At year 15, the project is eligible for the qualified contract process. And here it kind of bifurcates into potentially expiration and then termination. So we're going to look at expiration first. And this represents the fulfillment of the 30-year obligation and is indicated by the green arrows going to the right. The QC process is eligible anytime during this second 15-year period. It doesn't just occur at year 15. We are able to potentially issue additional tax credits in that second 15-year period, which in turn will extend the affordability another 30 years. And that's what we're talking about when we refer to preservation. It should be noted also that in the past 5 years, to obtain any tax credits through the division, whether for new construction or preservation, when those tax credits are allocated, the owner must waive the right to exercise the QC process. Now we'll focus on termination. And that's represents, stay there. It represents the abandonment of affordability before the 30-year timeline is completed and is indicated by the red arrows to the left. So should an owner exercise that QC option, the division is notified by the owner and the onus is on the division as we have 1 year to locate a purchaser. Most times, this is really, really difficult due to the difference between the IRS determined price and the actual market rate value of the property. If somehow we can locate a purchaser, the property will retain the affordability until at least the term of the 30-year period. But in most cases, a buyer can't be located, and existing residents will still have their affordability restrictions in place for only the next 3 years. Once those affordability restrictions expire, the property can go to market rate, and those residents are at a risk of being displaced due to the increase in rent. So with that background, we can now turn to Section 3. And Section 3 provides the requirements when an owner is going to exercise their termination rights. So, and going back to that timeline, that's the path indicated with the red arrows. When an owner submits a request to obtain a qualified contract for a property to the division, they must also provide written notice to the local jurisdictions and each tenant of the property. In turn, the division is required to notify our other partners in affordable housing. And this must be done by a minimum of 12 months before the owner submits the request to the division. The balance of Section 3 has the requirements of the notices and the potential for penalties, which I will cover a little bit later. Next slide. Section 4 provides the requirements when an owner is going to exercise their expiration rights. And going back to that timeline, this is the path indicated by the green arrows. So the balance of Section 4 effectively mirrors the requirements of the notices established in Section 3, but with some subtle differences, as this is an expiration process, not a termination process. While the division will receive notice at least a year from the expiration date, in some cases, the affordability restrictions will go longer than what is prescribed because there might be additional funding stream which supports longer affordability. And the language in Section 4 does contemplate this situation. Next slide. Section 5 contemplates the requirements when a property is exercising voluntary affordability. Many of our partners, particularly our mission-driven and nonprofit developers, for various reasons may continue to the extent that they possibly can the affordability restrictions on the property. Here, the notification requirements are very similar to those that have been discussed in Section 4. And because they are doing this voluntarily, both the division and the affordable housing community are interested in making sure the tenants are notified should those affordability restrictions cease, and that the division is notified so we can hopefully find another partner and keep our affordable database intact. This next slide demonstrates the requirements of the notifications to local jurisdictions and the tenants in Sections 3, 4, and 5. It requires the notification to local governments to include details about the property, the expiration of the affordability restrictions, and the contact information of the owner. To the tenants, it describes the timeline, the protections that they have, a description of housing resources, and again, the contact information of the owners. The penalties for failure to provide this information is expressed in both Section 3 and 4, the termination and expiration sections. In both cases, the division can impose up to a $10,000 administrative fine for failure to notice. In addition to what's shown here in Section 3, the termination timeline, those who exit affordability through the QC process will not be able to apply for any tax credit program for the next 5 years. Two notes I'd like to make here. The division intends to work with our partners in the adoption of regulations for the administrative fines, as $10,000 would seem a bit excessive for someone who inadvertently misses the notification timeframes and might be their first offense. Additionally, we did not include these penalties in Section 5 for those who are providing voluntary affordability, as we felt it would be punitive to those who are really, really good actors in this space. Next slide. And Section 6 establishes the timelines for these provisions. Everything basically comes into effect on October 1st, 2021. With that, I will turn it back to Senator Ratty for some final words.
Chair, this is broadcast. Oh, pardon me.
Sorry, I was having a hard time getting out of the share. Can you see me and hear me now?
I can see you and I can hear you.
Okay, great. I felt trapped in Zoom world there for a second. I apologize. All right, so just to summarize, if you are one of the Nevadans who is lucky enough to have landed a subsidized affordable unit, you could be in sort of three separate situations. One is that you could be in a property that was built before 5 years ago that has a 30-year restriction on it for affordability, but doesn't have a protection from that developer using a federal tool. This is a federal tool called a qualified contract to terminate that affordability. That's one, you could be in a property like that. In that case, there's a process where the division's going to get notification, but maybe tenants will or won't. There's a 3-year process for that project to be able to return to market rate. I want to just star something that Director Across said there. For the past 5 years, we're not allowing that to happen anymore on any new projects because through the contracting process, we've said you have to waive your right to be able to terminate your contract. So we've fixed that for any property that's been built in the last 5 years, but we can't go retroactively back to all those projects that were built 15 years ago to be able to fix it there. So there's a whole lot of units out there where if a developer chooses to exercise this qualified contract option, they could be terminating and losing affordability early. So that's one group of properties. There's a second group of properties that are not choosing to terminate, and they are allowing their project to go for the full 30 years. And then at the 30th year, that property expires. So that's a difference. It has expired. They're not choosing to do a qualified contract. But still, at that time, those tenants are at risk of going back to market rate, and we're at risk as a community of losing that property. In both those cases, we want a year's notice, and we want the ability for local governments, advocates, the housing division to lean in and see if we can save those properties. There's nothing that we can force that owner to do, but in many cases, if we know about it and we have the opportunity, we can offer additional tools to keep it affordable, or in some cases, we can organize a sale to an affordable developer who wants to keep those units affordable. We need a year to be able to work on it and try to save those properties. Then there's a third group where the 30-year expiration has passed. The often nonprofit developer has just chosen to keep it affordable because they're good actors in our community whose mission is to keep it affordable. And we're segregating them out because if they make a decision to choose not to continue that affordability, we still want the 12-month notice, but we don't think it's appropriate to penalize them because frankly, they're well past the contract that they signed at that point anyway. But we are asking them to give us the notice so that we can notify the tenants. Because again, if there's only 18 units for every 100 that we need in the extremely low income and only 40 for every 100 that we need in the low income, it's very hard for these individuals to find housing once they lose those affordable units. So we're still looking that even for those good actors, even when they're already past the restrictions in their contract, that they give us 12 months notice so that the tenants know what they're up against and we still have an opportunity to save it. So that, in summary, is what the bill does. We know that it is wonky housing policy, and that is why you have the director of the housing division here to answer any questions, should you have detailed questions.
Thank you very much, Senator Ratty. Do you need to do any other walking through the bill, or are you ready for questions?
We're hoping that we've beat this particular bill to death and that you're ready to ask questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Committee questions. Senator Neal, please.
Thank you, Chair. I had questions to Mr. Acroft. I get what's going on in this bill. So I guess the first question that I was wondering was the provisions that you have in here for the notice. And I know that it says up to $10,000, but are there other states that have implemented this, and have there been challenges around undue restraint, I guess, on, potentially a contractual term or yeah, that's my question.
Steve Acroft for the record. To you, Senator Neal, through the chair. As was indicated, there are other states that have preservation types bills. It is a recommended practice from the National Council of State Housing Agencies that you do this notification and that you basically prescribe that if you're going to issue tax credits, that the developers waive the ability to exit through the QC. So I'm hoping that answered your question.
So, yeah,
And I'll go ahead and add on to that.
can I clarify
Madam
the
Chair,
question?
this is Julia Ratty through you to Senator Neal. We did work with LCB Legal because we did understand that we're dealing with existing contracts to see if there was anything that we were doing that would abrogate the existing contracts. And the answer that we got back was that we were staying within a safe space.
Go
Okay.
ahead, Senator Neal, if you have a clarifying question.
Yeah. So basically, you're saying as long as you're, I guess, waiving a criteria, or you're in this period where it's going to expire, that it's okay to insert a new term. Is that what I'm understanding?
That is the answer that we got.
Okay.
Senator Ratty for the record.
And okay, and so there's no federal conflict with doing that, and no state has been sued for doing it.
Again, Senator Ratty for the record, not that we're aware of.
Okay.
Thank you. Senator Gokachia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine's a lot simpler than what Ms. Neal had, but I'm just concerned at looking at your numbers in the presentation. You showed about 7,500 of them would be at the 30 years, but about 500 of those, or over 5% of them, it looks like are in disrepair and couldn't be repaired. At what point do you realize that you're just going to have to write them off? It's probably not feasible to rebuild them.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator Gokachia. Yeah, we recognize, that's why we highlighted it in this slide, that not every, Senator Ratty for the record, not every unit is salvageable. But we do think in that situation, it's still critically important that those tenants get the 12 months notice so that they have time to start making plans for what their next step might be. Because when that 12 month comes up, that developer can still flip that to market rate and can be charging even more money for a unit that's probably not very desirable.
I thank you, but it sounds like, yeah, they could at that point go ahead and flip it, even though it's almost on borderline habitable, and be able to move ahead with it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, to you, through you to Senator Gokachia, I don't mean to be flippant, but they can probably still charge $1,400 a month for it in Reno because the supply and demand is so challenging.
Additional questions? Senator Hansen, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually have a bunch. One is, I don't know, I'm uncomfortable calling people bad actors who are actually fulfilling the terms of the contract, okay? Just that terminology disturbs me. After 30 years of doing it, have a contract saying they can then open it up to the market, and somehow they're bad actors for doing that.
Madam Chair, may I answer that question?
Oh, it's not really a question. It's more like just a statement. The question I have is, what is the current policy for the termination when they hit that 13-year window where they have an opportunity to possibly go to a market-based rent? What is the current time frame that they have to notify you on under current law?
So, Madam Chair, through you to Senator Hansen.
You can just go straight, Senator.
Thank you, because apparently I've forgotten how to do this. Senator Ratty, for the record. So first of all, I did want to address the bad actor comment. We're not calling anybody bad actors. What we are calling folks is good actors. So there is a group of developers that once they have they've gotten past their 30-year contract restriction, they still keep it affordable. Most of them are nonprofits like Nevada Hand or a housing authority that have a mission. We're not saying if they don't, they're a bad actor. They're just some extremely good actors that, well beyond the constraints of a contract, keep it affordable. For the second part of your question, I will turn it over to Mr. Acroft.
Steve Acroft for the record. Effectively, Senator Hansen, right now they would come to us, indicate that they want to go through the qualified contract process. And that's what starts the year clock to find somebody to purchase that particular property.
I mean, so right now they also have a 1-year window that they have to, and the only thing that's changing in this law then is that if they don't do it in that 1-year window, you're going to fine them up to $10,000.
No.
No. Okay. Well, then I'm confused. Right now I hit my 13-year window. I then have how much time legally to notify you that by the 15th year, I'm going to switch to a market-based system.
So Steve Acroft, for the record, you have 1 year in that process.
So, and if I may, sir.
It's 1 year. The only thing that's changing then is the $10,000 fine if they don't do it in that 1-year window.
So if I may, this is Senator Ratty for the record. On a termination, in the current law, they have 1 year to execute that contract, and they only are required to notify the housing division. It's unclear whether or not the housing division can let local governments, housing authorities, others who might be interested in approaching that developer to see if we can extend the affordability. So what would be different is that notification would now go to the housing division, local governments, and critically, tenants. So tenants need to know.
You're expanding who that requirement goes to.
Correct.
And
that's only on the termination portion. Right now, if you're hitting the 30-year mark, so you haven't chosen to do the qualified contract and you're going for the full 30 years, there's no notification requirement. And if you're one of the, I'll call them great players, for lack of to not make a contrast, and it's just affordable forever, you don't have to tell anybody anything. And so really this is about making sure that every tenant, no matter, because they're not going to know if they're in a qualified contract property or a 30-year property or a great player property, that every tenant, no matter what, is going to get that 12-month notice, and that the local governments and others who might be able to lean in and work with that developer to keep it affordable have a year to work on it.
Okay, thank you. I was confused on a bunch of that. I will say, I think Senator Neal's point is really one that initially I was really concerned about too. And that is the kind of the concept of an impairment of contract. So, but if LCB says that this, this passes the smell test, well, so be it. But it still seems like you're changing the rules kind of midstream on some of these folks. So anyway, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Additional questions from anybody on the committee? So, Senator Ratty, can we just have, because somebody sent me this question, can we just confirm whether this does or does not have anything to do with Section 8 housing?
So that's a complicated, Senator Ratty for the record. So that's a little bit of a complicated question. So let me try to answer it this way, and then I'm going to ask Division Director Acroft to bail me out if I don't get this quite right. So Section 8 has multiple programs. So often the most well-known program is there's two ways that we accomplish affordability. One way is to build affordable projects and put people in an affordable unit that has the subsidy, right? The other way is to buy down the rent for people in a market rate. So that's the HUD Section 8 voucher program. And so with that voucher program, a housing authority issues a voucher to an individual. They go out and they find an apartment on the market, and then that voucher helps them buy down the rent. So let's just say the rent is $1,200. They get a $300 voucher. They can afford a $1,200 apartment, but they're only going to pay $900 of it, and HUD's going to pay the rest. This should not affect that at all. But there are other Section 8 projects that helped to build affordable units. And we like to talk about affordable housing development plans. Like, I'm going to quote Steve Acroft, and I'm just so excited that we get to go back to this example, like a lasagna, because almost every affordable housing project has multiple layers of funding sources. And so in some of these projects, there could be Section 8 funding that helped build the unit in the first place. So if that's the question the person is asking, in theory, one of these projects could include Section 8 housing funding. So that was a long answer. Steve or Director Acroft, or Bill, anything to add?
You nailed it. You got a little astray. Section 8 funding is not actually used in the construction of the project, but it is used to potentially help some occupants of that particular development.
Yeah. So for example, I have a constituent who's living in an affordable unit. the affordability was bought down with the low-income housing tax credits. And then another Section 8 waiver is coming down, and it is buying down the rent because he's extremely low income. So he's in an affordable unit that's getting bought down even more as Section 8 because he lives on $865 a month.
And I believe that that's probably where this question was going, was the voucher piece, and having to identify a house that, or housing that you have to be Section 8. So I suspect that's where it was going, not the other way. So thank you for that. If we have further questions, we'll ask. Any other additional questions? Senator Neal, you look like you have a thought. Nope. Okay. All right. Well, we don't appear to have any additional questions. So with that, Senator Ratty, if you think we've answered those, we'll go to support. And broadcasting, when you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. To testify in support of SB 12, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 781. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Nick Vanderpool, NICKVANDERPOEL, with Capital Partners, today representing the Nevada Rural Housing Authority in support of Senate Bill 12. As presented, Senate Bill 12 provides additional tools in the toolbox to help address affordable housing in Nevada. The Nevada Rural Housing Authority wants to thank Senator Ratty for her continued mission and leadership in helping this critical topic in the Silver State. Thank you to her and all the stakeholders involved in the opportunity of crafting Senate Bill 12, and we urge your support. Thank you, Chair and committee members, for your time.
Thank you very much. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 598. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Audra Hammernick, HAMERNIK. Good afternoon, Chairwoman and distinguished members of the committee. I'm Audra Hammernick, the President and CEO of Nevada Hand. Nevada Hand is the state's largest nonprofit affordable housing developer, and we operate over 34 communities in southern Nevada that help over 7,900 residents, which include working families and seniors on fixed incomes each year. I'd like to thank Senator Ratty for her advocacy and hard work on Senate Bill 12 and the other committee members of the Advisory Committee on Housing. I'm proud to sit on that committee, and we want to recognize that affordable housing is a key component of our community, and we're happy to provide guidance on best practices. Nevada Hand supports Senate Bill 12 as amended, which provides residents with sufficient and proper notice if their home will no longer be subject to affordability standards. Like many other affordable housing developers, we rely on federal low-income housing tax credits and other governmental programs to finance our projects. And our mission as a nonprofit developer is dedicated to providing affordable housing even after those affordable housing terms expire. So Senate Bill 12 proactively engages with owners to preserve affordable housing, and we are in support of the bill. Thank you for allowing us to speak.
Thank you very much. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 598. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 598. Please press star 6 now to unmute yourself. Caller with the last 3 digits of 861. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes. It may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 861. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello. Hello, this is Eileen Piekars, P-I-E-K-A-R-Z. I'm with Rural Community Assistance Corporation. RCAC is a nonprofit organization with staff based in Fallon, Fernley, Reno, and Las Vegas. We work to provide technical assistance and training on affordable housing, water and wastewater systems, and economic development in rural communities. I encourage you to support SB 12 as we think it will help facilitate preservation of Nevada's existing precious affordable housing stock, and it'll ease the transition for low-income families who might have to relocate should properties be converted to market-rate housing. We have experience working with rural communities to assemble that package of financing to preserve affordability of existing rental properties. We know it can be successful, but we also know it takes time, and the notice requirements in SB 12 can facilitate this outcome. So we encourage your support, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 080. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 080. Please press *6 now to unmute yourself. Caller with the last 3 digits of 475. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Kelly Crompton, C-R-O-M-P-T-O-N, representing the City of Las Vegas. Excuse me. The City of Las Vegas is in support of SB 12, and we thank Senator Ratty for bringing forward this important piece of legislation. SB 12 will help discourage failing to provide adequate notices regarding termination of affordability restrictions to tenants who are low income, financially vulnerable, or financially distressed. This legislation allows tenants to financially prepare for possible changes in their living situations, such as those tenants participating in the city-sponsored home program. Affordable housing is an ongoing issue within the City of Las Vegas, and our Office of Community Services works hard to help prevent members of our community from experiencing homelessness in Southern Nevada. SB 12 is an important step to help maintain affordable units within the region. Thank you so much for your time.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 948. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes. It may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 948. You have 2 minutes. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Don Darrow Loop and members of the committee. For the record, David Cherry, spelled D-A-V-I-D-C-H-E-R-R-Y, and I'm Government Affairs Manager for the City of Henderson. The City of Henderson supports SB 12, and we appreciate the bill sponsor for bringing forward this important legislation, which will assist in our efforts to maintain a supply of affordable housing to serve the needs of our community. The notification mechanism in the bill will provide advance warning regarding the potential loss of affordable housing units, providing critical time for municipalities and the partners they work with to assess available options and to mitigate any negative effects that such a change may have on residents who rely on this housing. Thank you for this opportunity to express support for this valuable bill.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 988. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes. It may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Paulson, spelled E-M-I-L-Y-P-A-U-L-S-E-N, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Nevada Homeless Alliance. We urge you to support SB 12. The availability of affordable housing is key to addressing homelessness, and this bill will add an important tool to our state's affordable housing toolbox. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 739. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Joanna Jacob, JOANNA-JACOB, Government Affairs Manager for Clark County. We wanted to testify in support of this bill. The longer notice period that is provided in this bill to local governments and to Clark County as the regional service provider will give us time, critical time, to work with our community partners to work on preserving affordable housing in our community, which is a priority for Clark County. So wanted to register our support for all the reasons that you've heard. Thank you for your time.
If you recently just joined us, we are currently in support of SB 12. To testify in support of SB 12, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. That's star 9. Caller with the last 3 digits of 412. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, this is Christine Hess, CHRISTINEHESS, and I am the Executive Director for the Nevada Housing Coalition. Thank you for the opportunity to express our strong support of SB 12 today. The Nevada Housing Coalition is a statewide nonprofit established to advance affordable housing for all Nevadans, with about 100 members representing the public and private sectors, urban and rural, across Nevada. Affordable housing is a complex issue that impacts more than just the ability of Nevadans to have safe shelter. The rent eats first. This means that when Nevadans do not have housing available that is affordable, although they may still have a roof over their heads, they are unable to pay for the basics like food and health care, and they also have limited capacity to take advantage of workforce development and education opportunities to advance themselves as our economy diversifies. They're coming from a place of crisis. They are housing insecure. SB 12 is a critical, proactive solution to supporting Nevada's map that are using it as a comprehensive strategy to current. We simply cannot recover from the types of loss of 7,500 high-risk units over 5 years. We're already in a deficit. SB 12 supports our ability to preserve these units at high risk. I want to thank the Nevada Housing Advisory Committee, including Senator Rowdy, Bill Brewer, and Steve Acroft, for their leadership and stewardship of this bill. It's practical in implementation, not overly burdensome, and yet respectful of our existing public investment. The Nevada Housing Coalition would also like to emphasize our commitment to the successful enactment through our strategic priorities of advocacy, education, and collaboration as we build up affordable housing capacity in our state.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 087. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Jared Luke, JAREDLUKE, Government Affairs Director for the City of North Las Vegas. I want to just echo all of the previous comments in support of SB 12 and add the City of North Las Vegas support to this bill. This is good legislation. It's good legislation for the residents of North Las Vegas and for the residents of the state in general. Just want to add one thing that I agree with a comment made earlier about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's important that we identify what those needs are and help these folks that are in situations where they need to take advantage of affordable housing to be able to have a home, meet those basic needs so that we can look forward to a new future, and those folks can reach out and look for new employment as we expand our economy. But without all of that, if they're worried about the basic needs of where they're going to live and a roof over their head, it's impossible for people to reach out and succeed in life. Thank you for the time.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 940. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Brooke Page with Corporation for Supportive Housing, spelled BROOKE, last name PAGE. As a member of the Advisory Committee on Housing, we at CSH, a national nonprofit organization, support this bill for preservation to preserve the units in Nevada that ensure that we have the units that are necessary, especially for those that are extremely low income and our households that are in need of this crisis. And we stand in support of this great legislation and ask for your support. Thank you so much.
Caller with the last three digits of 294. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Chair Dondero Loop and members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to provide comments today on this bill. This is Callie Wilsey on behalf of the City of Reno. My name is CALLIWIL, S as in Sam, EY. City of Reno wanted to offer their support to Senate Bill 12 for the various reasons discussed by other commenters today. Maintaining our affordable housing is a critical issue for our community, and it's something we've highlighted in our legislative platform as this is City of Reno offers, and thanks for the opportunity to weigh in today.
If you have recently just joined us, we are testifying in support of SB 12. To testify in support of SB 12, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits of 080. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Eric Novak, ERICNOVAK. I'm president of Praxis Consulting Group, which provides development finance assistance for affordable housing developments in Nevada. I'm speaking in strong support of Senate Bill 12, which we believe is a great first step towards the preservation of our valuable affordable housing stock in Nevada. It takes several years and lots of public subsidy to plan and to construct new affordable properties. However, over the last several years, we've been losing units faster than we've been creating new units due to properties expiring out of their affordability restrictions or owners exercising a loophole in the regulations to opt out early in a process called qualified contract. The notification provisions in SB 12 will give the Nevada Housing Division and local governments advance notice of properties exiting the affordable housing program. It will buy us some time to connect properties for sale with good affordable housing stewards and to assemble the resources to preserve some of these developments. 2 years ago, we lost 500 units in downtown Reno at Courtyard Center and City Center to the qualified contract process. By the time the City of Reno learned of this sale, it was too late to act. With SB 12, the owner would have been required to notify the city in advance of opting out of the affordability restrictions. I want to thank the Advisory Committee on Housing and its chair, Senator Ratty, for their extraordinary work on this bill, as well as the working group that has made a number of suggestions for improving the original language. I did want to make one suggestion for improving the effectiveness of the bill. In Section 4, subsection 2, I recommend the following change, and the sentence reads, if the project is subject to affordability restrictions with different expiration dates, the written notice required pursuant to subsection 1 must be provided not less than 12 months before the latest, and I'm recommending just striking latest and replacing with earliest date on which an affordability restriction, and I'm recommending adding the words for the majority of the affordable units expires. A lot of projects with 100% low-income housing tax credits have a small number of units with home funds restrictions that have a longer expiration date. This change would ensure that the notification occurs when the tax credits expire and not the home funds, which are often a token number of units in the transaction, and would provide broader protection.
Mr. Novak, yes. Can I just please suggest that you're at your 2-minute time limit, and if you could please contact the sponsor of the bill and see if she would be interested in an amendment.
I will forward our comments to the working committee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair, you have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. And that means we'll go to opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. To testify in opposition of SB 12, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, to testify in opposition of SB 12, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. And we will go to neutral.
Thank you. To testify neutral in SB 12, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'll ask Senator Ratty if you have any closing comments before I close the hearing on Senate Bill 12.
Thank you, Chair. I will keep it brief. I would just like to say that I believe that we've struck a balance here. Again, the bill does not abrogate anybody's property rights. If at the end of the day they reach that period of termination or expiration and they choose to sell the property or return it to market rate, they can still do that. We think it's a small ask to ask for 12 months notice. We've seen in other states where developments have been saved because if you can get to that developer with the tools to keep it affordable, or if they want to sell, often they will sell to somebody else who will keep it affordable, that we can save some of these units, not all of them. So again, it's Julia Ratty, Senate District 13, asking for your support on Senate Bill 12.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And with that, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 12. We will open the hearing on Senate Bill 150. This measure makes changes to provisions related to housing also. I'm hoping that Senator Harris is with us, as she was also on another committee. So when she's ready. Perfect. Thank you. Well, I invite you and whoever you have with you to go ahead and proceed when you're ready. Thank you.
My name is Dallas Harris, representing District 11 in Clark County. I'm here to present Senate Bill 150. I hope the members have had a chance to review the conceptual amendment, as that is how I will be walking through the bill today. I have with me Matt Walker of Greenberg Traurig to answer any detailed questions about zoning. And I'll be available, of course, to answer any questions as well. So, Senate Bill 150 has one goal. That is to require localities to find a place to put tiny homes. So, in some parts of Nevada, there is no place where you can put a tiny home. It is not quite a single-family residence. It is not quite an RV or a mobile home. I very well acknowledge that us at the state level are not the zoning experts. And so my goal with this bill is to push that decision-making down to the local level. And I'm simply asking that they find a place to put these. I've made just a couple of distinctions here for counties that have a population over 100,000. I'm asking them to designate a zone for tiny houses as an accessory dwelling unit, a single family dwelling unit, and to allow for tiny home mobile or tiny home parks. For those with a population of 100,000 or less, I am asking them to do any of the three. If they feel capable, I would like them to do all three, but at least they will be able to address the desire and the need, in my opinion, for tiny homes in Nevada. In addition, local governments will be able to provide any additional requirements for the structure to be designated as a tiny home. We will ask that they designate the tiny house as an accessory dwelling unit in an appropriate zoning designation, as a single family unit or as a tiny house within an appropriately zoned tiny home park. The certificate of occupancy for a tiny house may allow the house for residential use as either single family dwelling or as an accessory dwelling unit, whichever is appropriate. And any tiny certificate of occupancy for a tiny home not on a permanent foundation can only be issued when located on a parcel of land and only for that location. If a tiny home does receive a certificate of occupancy and then it's moved to a different parcel, a new certificate of occupancy would then need to be issued. And then the bill concludes by placing a couple of requirements on any tiny house park that is designated. We need to make sure that there are provisions for them to be adequately spaced, allowing for public safety, including but not limited to firefighting equipment and vehicles, and for the placement of proper utilities. There needs to be provisions for individual or community water and wastewater service. And again, minimum spacing requirements, minimum or maximum size for the park itself, appropriate open space, and appropriate parking. And again, I believe that the localities are best suited to make these decisions. I want to make a couple of notes about what this bill does not do. It does not require any actual tiny homes to be built. It does not require municipalities to overlap current existing residential zoning with tiny home zoning if they do not so choose. And it also does not require, again, for those populations under 100,000, for them to zone all three options: the accessory dwelling unit, the single family residence, and the mobile park. And really that is so that those smaller localities who don't have a zoning staff are not overwhelmed with all three of these options, and all three may not be needed in some of these rural areas. Chair, at this time, I'll take any questions.
Okay, you had mentioned Mr. Walker was with you. Is that just for questions?
Yes, he is here to answer technical questions. He knows a lot more about zoning than I do. And so as you said earlier, I'm phoning a friend.
Okay, that's good. All right. So with that, committee questions. Senator Goicoechea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Harris, I guess I've just got a question. Is a tiny house defined square footage or whatever? I mean, what's a tiny house or just a small home?
Thank you for that question, Senator Goicoechea. To you through Chair Don Darrow Loop. A tiny home based upon this bill will be defined by reference to the International Residential Code, Appendix Q, or any of its successor versions, because that may be updated at any time. And so, yes, it is currently 400 square feet, not including loft size.
Is that it, Senator Goicoechea?
Yeah, thank you. Okay. I missed the mute button again, I guess. So
it's way okay.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. Senator Hansen? No? Okay. Senator Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a couple of questions. I'm going to start off with property tax, or not even property tax, property value. Even I understand that you want to create a zone, but how do these tiny houses grow in value? I've always seen them as a drag on the value of single residential. So are there studies out there that say that these grow in significant value where it actually benefits the local economy?
You know what, Senator Neal, to you through Chair Don Darrow Loop, I think that's a great question. And unfortunately, I don't have any numbers on how these homes appreciate versus other single family residences, but I'd be more than happy to do some research on that. And I just want to, get to one of your concerns. I think this is why it is unlikely that in Clark County they will be placing these next to existing single-family residences, or maybe having them mix where you've got a two-story house and then a tiny home next to it. because you don't want to interact with the property values in that way. But again, this is another reason why I'm kind of leaving it up to localities to decide where is the best place to put these.
And Senator Harris and Madam Chair, if I may, Matt Walker, for the record, thank you on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association, through you, Chair Dondero Loop, to Senator Neal. Excellent question. On the standalone tiny home and tiny home park conversation, there certainly is a national best standard and best practice standards that have been developed by the American Planning Association and others in terms of how you value and assess these structures. In terms of the accessory dwelling unit, they would be part of the parcel that's associated with the original single-family home. So they wouldn't be sold in separate parcels, and they would simply be another improvement that should be valued and assessed based on the overall residential homes value. And these are really critical in states like Washington and Minnesota in revitalizing communities, allowing seniors to age in place in their homes because they have an additional revenue source. And it really is a way to plug some extra life and extra density into some of our more established communities. Thank you.
Madam Chair, follow up?
Please go ahead.
So, and I'm glad you brought up an area, dense areas where there's potentially redevelopment or other things going on, because I guess I wanted to understand, like, if you allow the counties or local jurisdictions to come up with where it goes, how do you prevent it from going to an area where, let's say, they're like, well, you know, I don't want it in the lakes, but I'm perfectly okay with it going to the west side, right, where the property value is low and it won't affect me, and it's okay for them because the average property tax value over there is $5,000. So we'll test it there, right, where it is a further exacerbates, number one, redevelopment and changing the landscape of an area so that you can actually get an advancement for that community. And I know I'm saying this in a derogatory way because I'm not a fan of tiny houses, mainly because I don't want it to go into poor areas, and I don't want it to go into poor areas that I want a redevelopment to occur and actually have sustainable homes, where good homes, you know what I'm saying? Like something, the American dream home. Does that make sense?
It does. And to you, Senator Neal, through Chair Dondero Loop.
Directly.
Thank you so much. You know, I think you're hitting on a couple of things. Disparities in zoning, which is something I can't fix in this bill, and also a difference, I think, in our philosophies about tiny homes. Right, this is something I personally would choose to live in and maybe build as a permanent residence because of who I am and you know, my own personal taste. But I also see these as a stepping stone to larger home ownership in that American dream sense, not as some hindrance to that eventual dream. So really what I'm looking to do here is to allow those who'd like to build one. Let's say you've got some land in Mount Charleston and you want to put a tiny home up on your land, but there's nowhere to put them, right? So for those who'd like to buy one or who would like to put it in their backyard, I would like to give them the option. And again, I'm hoping that these can also become an alternative to those who cannot take that first step or get that 20% down for your first, you know, $275,000 home.
And Madam Chair, if I may, Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders, Senator Neal, I would also add that this is in the situation where you have accessory dwelling units enabled across a variety of residential zoning, this is an ability to have redevelopment without really changing the existing residential nature of the neighborhood. So where folks might come into the historic West Side and say the only way we're ever going to revitalize is to raise some of these parcels and start something brand new, this is a way to inject dollars, inject investment, and increase values, revitalize communities while preserving the existing zoning types. And that's why when you look to best practice, and we hope that Clark County, North Las Vegas, and others will look to best practice across the country, from Washington, New Hampshire, Minnesota, and instead of picking a spot here and there and saying this is an appropriate place for tiny homes, be bold enough to adopt policies across categories and say these entire residential categories across our valley are appropriate for accessory dwelling unit redevelopment and utilizing tiny homes. And we certainly think that would be appropriate and have a more organic and maybe less concentrated development of these tiny homes, which I think sounds like it's important to you, and it would certainly be an important community discussion.
Madam Chair, just one last question and then I'm good. I think these bills are exhausting me. So I just have one last question on one. It was mentioned like the infrastructure, the water, waste management, fire. I guess, and it goes back to my first question on the value and the property value of these, and if it's a local improvement district or however this is zoned, how is this paid for, right? If they become a part of a zoning area, and then let's say the houses you're saying, well, they're accessory dwelling in a park and they can move in and out, but yet these services have then been designated for this zone and these homeowners in these tiny houses, right? I mean, typically the homeowner, right, pays for that, but when it becomes a vacancy or a foreclosure or whatever, it is no longer that, right? It then becomes this blight.
And I'll just quickly kind of address that, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Walker for a further response. When we come to the idea of these tiny home parks and requiring that there be these spacing requirements and room for utilities, I do not see them operating too much different than existing mobile home or RV parks. And I would hope that localities have the same kind of protections in place for when something is abandoned or when something becomes dilapidated, and that this would not significantly change that. Mr. Walker?
Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association, I would echo Senator Harris's comments in that Southern Nevada Health District, local governments, and others make great efforts to ensure that whatever they're planning in terms of wastewater or other utilities, that there are contingency plans. And I would imagine in the case of a park, you would need an overall kind of master developer of that park if those lots aren't going to be fee simple transferred to the owners. And I would certainly defer to our local government partners and utilities on how that would work in the case that a park winds down. But we think that there's significant structures in place. And I would also say that Senator Harris took a pretty light touch in terms of any sort of mandates or imposing a structure on local governments. So we hope that they would be able to innovate and best meet the needs of their community as they implement these policies.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Neal. Additional questions from the committee? I have one that when I heard you talking about putting this on a lot. So is there something where I can't continue to customize this. So I start with 400. I end up with, I put on 200 more, I put in 200 more, and then pretty soon I've got like a big house that's kind of this add-on.
And to your question, Chair, thank you so much for it. This would not be any different than adding on to your current single-family residence. If the lot is zoned for 5,000 square feet and you continue to make improvements and add on, of course, you would need to get approval for construction and make sure that all of that add-on does not put you out of the zoning that you are already in. And the same would apply here. The tiny homes do have a maximum square footage, which may adjust as the International Residential Code evolves, but it's currently at 400 with excluding a loft. So I guess theoretically you could kind of build up a little bit. But of course, you would just have to stay within your zoning regulations as you would for any other building structure.
So you could have like a tree house.
And Madam Chair, if I may, Matt Walker on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association, I would say that the one way that I believe Senator Harris is meaningfully addressing this issue is by taking these tiny homes and really plugging them into a regulatory structure. So where you have your initial building permit pulled by the local government instead of somebody just plopping one of these things in their backyard, we really are starting to create a regulatory structure where local governments can get their arms around these structures and ensure that public safety and the characters of the neighborhood are both being meaningfully protected while we're also seeing where we can push the envelope and providing these new innovative living spaces for residents. But certainly as you add a porch or add other things that would add square footage to these, you would need to come back for the permit to the body that you got that original permit from. And we hope that they coordinate with their local code enforcement and planning departments, as they do a great job of in Southern Nevada, and keep check on making sure that they're striking the balance between safety and the property rights and the ability of folks to customize and enjoy their property.
So just to follow up to that, so when you purchase a mobile home, generally you purchase it from a dealer or a supplier, and then that home is placed on that piece of property within that mobile home park. Are these that type of a system as well? In other words, if I want to buy one of these or I want to live in one of these, do I go to where does the initial spot come from? I understand that if I already have one, there might be one that I could rent or move into, but how do they initially get to where they are going to be?
And Chair, currently you can buy tiny homes on Amazon. You can buy them from IKEA, but it is truly my hope that once we open up the regulatory structure for these, you will see developers building tiny home communities. It's my hope Howard Hughes might put a tiny home community in Summerlin. There will be a lot more options available as opposed to an individual having to kind of do it all on their own. So I see all of these being options in the future.
And Madam Chair, just to put a finer point on that, Matt Walker on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association, there's really two really common paths to get to a tiny home. And one is on a chassis, and it's got independent engineering or certification by the Manufactured Housing Division. And that's really a predominant model now, but I think it's because local governments haven't yet moved to adopt the Appendix Q for the IRC, which again is only a little less than 3 years old. So we understand why they haven't, but we hope to see, as Senator Harris mentioned, many more site-built homes in which you'd call a qualified contractor, or they would maybe even market to you, and instead of having to go the route of taking a manufactured structural and then modifying it to meet local standards and codes.
Okay, I see Senator Hansen. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. One, when I used to do a lot of housing tracks, one of the more popular options were called casitas or mother-in-law quarters, and they in effect sound very similar to the tiny house concept. The concern that I have, though, is if these are kind of standalones at some point, and I think this is one of the things Senator Neal may have been getting at, I could see one major fear would be, would these tenants, in effect, the people that buy them or live in them, have greater levels of costs to the cities and counties than the property tax these tiny homes would produce? Is there any, and that obviously becomes a concern because, in effect, the other types of residential housing ends up subsidizing these on the tax front versus the amount that the tax people consume. Could you address that, either Matt or Dallas, if you want to touch that?
Yeah, Senator Hansen, I'll start by making my best attempt. First, let me commit to get some more research for the committee on property tax, how they're assessed, how the values of these have been assessed, and whether there's been appreciation. I will say there is the intent of this bill is absolutely not to bring down existing property values or to require these to be something that will take away from the community. I'm really looking to add here. And I think an assumption underlying your question is that only certain people may choose to build these homes and or live in them. And I would challenge that assumption.
Senator Hansen, Matt Walker for the record on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association. I would just add that, new development is the number one driver of property taxes under our current property tax structure. And so I know that as someone who's worked on a few homes yourself, we hope that you're a fan and continue to support policies like this that get outside of the box and encourage new development. So we definitely see it as a net positive on property tax values when properly implemented. The only other thing I would add is that the ability of local governments to adopt impact fees that offset the cost of development, whether that's the need for fire service, the need for additional sewer service. That we've got robust programs, maybe overly robust to some critics in Southern Nevada, in terms of the impact fees that can be charged to new homes to ensure that they're not a burden on the communities surrounding them. And I certainly think that absolutely nothing in this bill would limit local governments from doing that, whether that's through a sewer impact fee on an accessory dwelling unit, or in the case of a new community that's all fee simple tiny homes, assessing that fire service fee that's appropriate for that community. So certainly in Southern Nevada, I think they do a fantastic job of planning that out and planning for those impacts and allowing for the fees to offset that instead of the neighboring residents to pick up the tab on that additional need for service.
Okay, well, thank you, Matt. And Dallas, I look forward to seeing those reports. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions from the committee? Vice Chair Orenshaw, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Harris, for bringing the bill. I know I've seen some of these tiny homes in Las Vegas and in unincorporated Clark County. I think at least one in Senate 21. My question, I think, for Mr. Walker, the tiny house park that's proposed in the conceptual amendment, would that be it would only be tiny homes, or could it also have manufactured homes, or could it be a mixture of both, or would it just be these tiny homes?
Senator Orenshaw, Matt Walker for the record on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association. That one I will have to defer to the local governments in terms of their willingness to do so, but I understand the importance of that question because I think there are key consumer protections in place for residents of parks, and I think that there would need to be a meaningful conversation about how that would transition to some sort of new type of ownership. And we'd be happy to take that conversation offline and answer any questions after we've had the benefit of having that conversation with local governments.
And Madam Chair, if I may, I'd just like to let you know, Senator Orenshaw, it is my intention that if the local jurisdiction finds that it's the best way to create zoning for this to allow this kind of mixed use, they will be able to do that. If they feel that for their area it is best to keep these separate from traditional manufactured homes, they will be able to do that. So it's really my intention to push these decisions down to the local level and allow them to zone as they see fit.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Additional questions? Anybody else? So if I'm understanding this correctly, there will be the local entities are who we are depending on to put the parameters of who, what, where within these tiny homes. Is that correct, Senator Harris?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Any additional questions? I'm seeing none. So we will go to support, and we'll hear testimony. Please listen carefully, and broadcasting will bring you in.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support of SB 150, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 685, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 685, please slowly spell and state your name for your record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Darrell Lupe, members of the Committee on Government Affairs. For the record, this is Daniel Pro, and I'm filling in for Chase Whittemore with Argenta Partners. I'm here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 150 on behalf of the Nevada Builders Alliance. NBA is the largest trade association in the state of Nevada with over 900 members covering all facets of the construction industry. We fully support the concept of the bill as presented, and we are shared some suggestions with the bill sponsor. We look forward to continuing our work with Senator Harris on the conceptual amendment by offering our subject matter expertise. In fact, our members have built and developed tiny homes, and we think that these are important tools for Nevadans to use to get our increasing housing prices under control. Efforts like this are exceptionally important as we look for ways to provide housing to all. We thank Senator Harris for bringing this bill forward and thank the chair for scheduling a bill hearing on Senate Bill 150. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 680, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, this is Chelsea Loomis. I'm just a private citizen here in Clark County, and I was calling in today because I am passionately in support of Senate Bill 150, coming from a background, a few different directions. One, I worked with Child Services Division in Oregon, and I echo the comments that the families or people all need steady housing and secure housing. That's really an important thing. Another thing is I also have family in Europe that lives in very high-end parts of town in 400 square feet in Munich, for example, and that's considered palatial. I mean, it's all relative, but what we're talking about these days is a whole new category of housing that has high-end furnishings. So in the same way that Starbucks revolutionized going out and having a cup of coffee or something, the tiny homes are also revolutionizing how somebody can gain independence. And so in a way that a mobile home is on or off wheels, because I used to work for an escrow company and they're hard to insure and things like that, the tiny home is often either built or paid in cash by the person. They're usually under 40, and they take a lot of pride in them, they take care of them, and they travel with them, because you got to understand a lot of these people are working mobily, or they are authors or writers or things like that. It's really a different category of housing. That's one category. And then there's small homes and the small home category. And somebody asked a question about appreciating property values. And that's the best way to do it, actually, is to put them, is to create that category as well and be able to put them on a foundation, because they're just getting census figures now. But if you look in like Bend, Oregon, there's a community, or at Mammoth, there is a ranch there that has put them on, these tiny homes on the ranch, and is renting them out. They're selling out, and they're creating all kinds of tourist revenue and things like that. I mean, that's another category for them. But in the way that Tesla couldn't get it done, the things they wanted to get done in California, and they came to Nevada, I think Nevada, coming from perspective of being raised in California, I think Nevada is the state of innovation. And I think that's really what we're talking about with these things, is innovating a new category. And the best way to take dependent folks off of the roles of public assistance is to give them a way to build wealth. And what I think this does is it gives them a foot in the door, particularly with smaller homes, but possibly even the tiny home, like buying their first vehicle. It's their housing vehicle. And then if they can get their foot in the door with a mini mortgage, sorry, I'll finish up. A mini mortgage is doable. You know, $150,000 is doable for a lot of these. So anyway, that's my support today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony.
If you recently just joined us, we are currently in support of SB 150. To testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 087. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Jared Luke, Jared Luke, the Government Affairs Director for the City of North Las Vegas. We want to thank the sponsor for working with the City of North Las Vegas and being transparent on the intent of Senate Bill 150. We appreciate the committee for the questions and identifying areas where this bill needs some clarification. We understand that each jurisdiction has its own unique zoning and ordinance codes, but we commit to work with the senator and on clarifying final language. And we thank the committee and the senator for their time.
Chair, you have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. Then we'll go to opposition.
Thank you. To testify in opposition of SB 150, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to neutral.
To testify neutral on SB 150, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 666, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 666, please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Thank you. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
I'm new at this. Warren Hardy, first name Warren, W-A-R-R-E-N, last name Hardy, H-A-R-D-Y. Today representing the Urban Consortium. If I may, Madam Chair, just reintroduce the Urban Consortium. It's an entity that has existed in the past in the legislature, made up of the cities of Henderson, Las Vegas, Reno, and Sparks. Our effort is to try to unify our effort to make this session easier on both the cities and their staffs, as well as the legislature and your staff. We are testifying today in neutral on this bill and appreciate Senator Harris. We're dealing with a couple of amendments that were presented to us over the weekend. We just received Senator Harris's amendment this morning, and our staff at each of the entities that we represent are reviewing them. And we appreciate the opportunity to continue to participate in the discussion. I really appreciate Senator Harris's acknowledgement that zoning is primarily under the purview of local governments, but want you, Madam Chair, the sponsor, to know that we also recognize the appropriateness of the legislature setting general policy objectives on these kinds of issues. So we are neutral at this point, but look forward to continuing to work with the sponsor to move this across the finish line. Thank you so much.
Caller with the last three digits of 863. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Dondero Loop and members of the Senate Government Affairs Committee. Dagny Stapleton for the record, DAGNY-STAPLETON. I'm the Executive Director of NACO, the Nevada Association of Counties. We want to put on the record that we really appreciate the Center working with counties on this bill. We understand her intent and what it is that she would like to accomplish with the legislation. We went back and forth on the language with her, and again, appreciate her willingness to do that. With the proposed conceptual amendment, we are neutral. I wanted to add that on behalf of NACO's rural members, we appreciate the Senator's willingness to recognize that requiring tiny homes in all of the following zones, single family, parks, as well as accessory dwelling units, may not be a good fit for all counties, especially our smallest counties, some of which have very few zoning districts to begin with, and actually some of those areas in some of our rural counties already allow tiny homes. So we appreciate more flexibility in their options for the rurals. And finally, we also appreciate the Senator's recognition that land use planning, zoning, and development code are local responsibilities and best carried out at the local level, and recognizing state frameworks as well. But allowing counties to do that on the local level based on the particular needs, geography, demographics, and other factors that vary county to county. Again, we appreciate the Senator working with us, and we stand ready to continue to do that as we move forward. Thanks to the committee.
Caller with the last three digits of 323. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 323. Please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Yes, for the record, my name is Steve Walker, STEVEWALKER. I represent Douglas, Lyons, Story, and Carson City counties. I'm testifying neutral on the conceptual amendment, waiting to see the LCD amendment. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Senator Harris for working with rural counties to address our concerns. I'd also like to thank Clark County and NACO for taking the lead with and working with Senator Harris. We will continue to be involved and look forward to achieving a positive outcome for all. Additionally, the rural issue, for a large part, is concentration of tiny homes without having municipal sewer and water. If you had a 10,000 square foot lot and you had 4 tiny homes on it, that's the same thing as having a single home on an individual acre. If you had that domestic well with sewer, all through Nevada, where we have that type of density on sewers and wet domestic wells, we contaminate the groundwater. That's our issue, and the new or conceptual amendment allows us to address that. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits of 739. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Joanna Jacob, JOANNA-JACOB, Government Affairs Manager for Clark County. We did work with Senator Harris over the weekend to try and work on the original bill, and what you now see before you is the conceptual amendment. Wanted to thank her for the time that she put in over this weekend, and like the previous callers, the recognition that zoning, local land use planning, et cetera, is better left at the local level. It was an interesting discussion today. I really appreciate the comments from Senator Neal, Senator Hansen. I think that these are things that exactly why we want to take the time and to study it and locate take the time to look at where to locate these things in Clark County. Clark County is in the midst of a major effort calling it Transform Clark County to rewrite our entire development code. So it's very timely, and we wanted to make sure that we can make the right decision for our community and, of course, welcome anybody's input in that process. So we are neutral today. We'll work with the senator on the conceptual amendment and final bill language and bring it back to this committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 229. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. Jamie Rodriguez for the record. That's JamieRodriguez. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for Washoe County, and I want to start by thanking the sponsor for working with us on this bill. Tiny homes are allowed in different areas of Washoe County. And based on our understanding from the sponsor, as well as what she testified today, that allowance would be able to continue without us having to create a new zoning for tiny homes. Also appreciates the local jurisdictions are able to add any stipulations that are necessary for tiny homes. For example, to be considered a single-family dwelling unit, it does have to be on a permanent foundation that's covered in other portions of our building code. We are here neutral today, looking forward to working with, or continuing to work with the sponsor, as we move from a conceptual amendment into draft language. But again, very much so appreciate the sponsor working with us and understanding how specific jurisdictions operate these separately. So thank you.
Chair, you have no more callers neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. Any concluding comments from the bill sponsor, Senator Harris?
Let me first thank you, Madam Chair. Let me first thank Matt Walker for accompanying me and doing such a great job answering questions as he always does. I'd also like to thank, as I'm sure you all heard, the kind of very large variety of stakeholders who were willing to work with me over the weekend and into the night on getting this bill to the point where it was today. And I look forward to continuing to work with them to get them over the finish line. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I couldn't find my little arrow to even open it myself, so apologies. Thank you very much for those comments, and I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 150, and may we go to public comment. Just a reminder, public comment is about anything that we have not discussed today, so the bills are already closed. Thank you very much, and we'll wait for broadcasting.
Thank you, Chair. To speak in public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you currently have no callers for public comment.
All right. Well, we'll give them just a couple minutes to see if they arrive. But I think that everybody's been on the line for a couple hours now. With that being said, hearing no more comments, that concludes our meeting for today. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, March 10th at 3:30, and this meeting is adjourned.